Imagine waking up in a city of white stone, with pyramids taller than any building around you, buried in a forest so dense that sunlight barely reaches the ground. Now imagine that, in a single generation, everyone simply walks away. That city was real, and what happened to it is one of the greatest mysteries in history. Except the answer isn't the one you were told. The Maya did not vanish. That has to be clear from the very start. It wasn't aliens, and there was no magical disappearance. And here's the best part. Today there are around 6 million people who still speak Maya languages, in Guatemala, in Mexico, in Belize, and beyond. The people are still very much alive. What collapsed was something else entirely, and it's far more unsettling. To understand what collapsed, let's follow one young woman. We'll call her Itzel. She's Maya, born in one of the great cities of the classic period, and she lived through the exact moment when her world went from its golden age to abandonment. She isn't a name carved in stone. She's the ordinary life behind one of the most famous falls in all of history. Itzel's world lay in the lowlands of Mesoamerica, the Yucatan Peninsula, and the jungle that today covers Guatemala, southern Mexico, and Belize. It was not a single kingdom. It was dozens of independent city-states, each with its own king, its own patron god, and its own rivalries. Think of something like ancient Greece, only set deep in the tropical rainforest. And these cities were giants. Tikal, in the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, held between 60 and 100,000 people at its peak in the 8th century. For its time, it was a true metropolis. It had temples more than 200 feet tall, plazas, water reservoirs, and palaces, all raised without the wheel, without pack animals, and without metal tools. Tikal's great rival was Calakmul, the kingdom of the snake, also home to tens of thousands. The two were the twin superpowers of the Maya world. And like every superpower, they lived at war. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul lasted more than a century, a kind of Cold War of the jungle, with smaller cities forced to choose sides. Itzel grew up hearing the names of those cities the way we hear the names of nations. Palenque, to the west, with its delicate stone reliefs. Copan, to the southeast, the capital of art and writing. Each with its own dynasty, its own monuments, its own history carved into stone to last forever. And it was exactly that which allowed their story to reach us at all. Because the Maya did something no other people in the Americas managed to do. They created a complete writing system. Not scattered pictures, real writing, with more than 800 signs, able to record any word in any Maya language. It was logosyllabic, part symbol, part sound. The only fully developed script anywhere on the continent before the arrival of Europeans. Itzel would have watched the scribes at work, high-status men who painted these glyphs into books of tree bark and carved them onto the stelae, those tall stone monuments standing in the plazas. Each stela recorded who the king was, which wars he won, who he married, and, always, the exact date. The Maya were obsessed with time. And here comes what impresses most. To record those dates, the Maya needed a concept almost no civilization in history ever invented on its own: the number 0. That's right, 0, which seems so obvious to us, was discovered independently only twice in the entire world, once in India and once here, in the forests of Mesoamerica. Hold on to this image. Itzel belonged to a people who grasped 0, mapped the heavens, and built pyramids. And yet, within a few decades, they abandoned it all. And the reason is no supernatural mystery. It's far more frightening, precisely because it's real. The Maya didn't have one calendar. They had several, all turning at once, like the gears of a cosmic clock. One of them, the sacred count, ran 260 days. Another tracked the solar year of 365. And there was a third, the most astonishing of all, capable of counting time across spans of thousands of years. That one was the long count. It counted the days from a mythical date of creation, one that corresponds to the 11th of August, 3,114 years before Christ. The Maya believed the world had begun at that exact instant, and they counted, day after day, how long the universe had existed. No other ancient culture thought on such a vast scale. And here we need to break a myth you've almost certainly heard. Remember the Maya end of the world in 2012? That story that the Maya calendar predicted the apocalypse? It's false. Completely false. The Maya never predicted the end of anything at all. What happened on the 21st of December, 2012, was simply the end of one great cycle of the calendar called a Baktan, a period of roughly 5,125 years. It was like our clock striking midnight, or the calendar rolling over from 1999 to 2000. A round number, a reason to celebrate, not to panic. The whole idea of catastrophe came from New Age books and theories of the 20th century, not from the Maya. Museum curators and archaeologists were blunt about it. There is no record whatsoever that the Maya thought the world would end. For them, time was a cycle. One cycle ends, another begins. It had always been that way. Itzel would have found our confusion amusing. For her, the calendar didn't announce destruction, it organized life. It told you when to plant the corn, when to hold ceremonies, when the kings should go to war. The sky was an open book, and the Maya priests knew how to read every page with a precision that still astonishes astronomers today. They predicted eclipses years in advance. They mapped the movement of Venus with an error of only a few hours across centuries. They built temples aligned with the rising sun on the equinoxes. All of this without a telescope, without a machine, only patient observation and mathematics. The Maya obsession with time was, in truth, science of the highest order. But the calendar also fed something darker. The Maya believed the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world and to move the sun, and that humans had to repay that debt in blood. That is why sacrifice, including human sacrifice, was a central part of their religion, not out of gratuitous cruelty, but because they believed that without it, the universe itself might stop. Itzel would have seen kings perform ritual bloodletting on themselves, in public, piercing their own tongue or body to offer blood to the gods. War captives from rival cities were the most common candidates for sacrifice. It was theater of power as much as of faith, the king proving that he was the bridge between mortals and the heavens. And there was one place where religion, politics, and death all met, the ball game. Almost every Maya city had its stone court, with sloping walls and a stone ring set high above. The players struck a heavy rubber ball using only their hips, never their hands. But the Maya ball game was far more than a sport. The ball game was a ritual. It reenacted the myth of creation, the struggle between life and death, between day and night. And on certain occasions, especially those involving war captives, the losing team, or the prisoners forced to play, could end up sacrificed. The court was, all at once, a stadium, a church, and an altar. This was Itzel's world at its height, gleaming white cities, because they were coated in painted stucco, often a vivid red. Markets full of cacao, which even served as money. Quetzal feathers, jade, obsidian, and salt traveling along trade routes that linked the jungle to the Mexican highlands. It was a world that was rich, connected, and sophisticated. The foundation of everything was corn. In some of their myths, the Maya called themselves the people of maize, created by the gods from corn dough. They farmed with ingenious systems, cleared plots in the forest, raised fields in the wetlands, terraces on the slopes. All of it calculated to feed hundreds of thousands of mouths on a land that seemed impossible. And here is the detail that turns the whole story on its head. To sustain those enormous cities, the Maya had to clear forest, a great deal of forest, to plant corn, to make fire, and above all to produce the lime used in the stucco that coated the temples. Every white building Itzel admired cost trees, millions of them. At first, this was no problem. The forest seemed endless. The rains came every year. The cities grew, the kings raised ever larger monuments, the population swelled. The Maya Classic period, from roughly 200 to 900 years after Christ, was a golden age. Itzel was born believing it would last forever, but the cities were growing too large for the land that fed them. The population of the lowlands may have reached several million people, packed into a tropical forest with thin soils and, in many regions, no great rivers. It was a delicate balance. It would take only one push to bring the whole thing crashing down. And the kings, instead of easing the pressure, did the opposite. They competed with one another by raising bigger temples, demanding more tribute, more corn, more labor from the people. Each new pyramid was a declaration of power and one more weight on a land already showing signs of exhaustion. Maya greatness was devouring its own foundation. The deforestation had an effect the Maya could not have foreseen. Without forest, the soil dries out faster. Fewer trees mean less moisture in the air, less rain, more heat. Modern studies show that the Maya's own deforestation likely made the region's climate hotter and drier. Without knowing it, they were sabotaging their own sky. Itzel may have noticed the first changes while she was still young. Harvests a little smaller. Reservoirs dropping sooner in the dry season. Priests holding more ceremonies for rain. Nothing that felt like the end. Just small warnings, easy to ignore while the city still shone and the drums still sounded at the festivals. Because the truth is that no one lives through a collapse realizing it's a collapse. You live through one bad year, then a worse year, then a war, then a drought. Each crisis seems temporary. And that's how it went, slowly, and then all at once, as Itzel's world began to fall apart. The final trigger would come from the sky, or rather, from its absence. Around the 9th century after Christ, something shifted in the climate of Mesoamerica. The rains, which had always come, began to fail. And it wasn't one bad season. It was decades. Scientists describe it as a series of severe, prolonged droughts, the worst the region had seen in thousands of years. How do we know this 1,000 years later? Nature kept the record. Scientists drilled into the beds of lakes like Shashankanab in Yucatan and read the sediment layer by layer. They also analyzed stalagmites in caves, which grow with the rain like the rings of a tree. And the result was unmistakable. The sky above the Maya had dried out. One of those droughts, according to the record in the stalagmites, lasted around 13 years in a row, the longest in 2,000 years in that part of Yucatan. 13 years. Imagine 13 harvests failing in a row, in an entire civilization that depended on corn and had already cut down much of the forest that helped keep the rain coming. For Itzel, this was no scientist's chart. It was hunger. It was the reservoir turning to cracked mud. It was water growing scarce and fought over. It was watching the cornfields wither under a sun that gave no mercy, and the priests offering sacrifice after sacrifice to rain gods who seemed to have turned their backs. And when the food runs out, faith in the king runs out with it. The entire legitimacy of the Maya kings rested on a single promise. They were the bridge to the gods. They guaranteed the rain and the harvest. But what happens when the rain doesn't come? Year after year, the king stops being divine. He becomes just a powerless man, seated on a useless throne. The drought didn't kill the Maya directly. It lit the fuse on everything that was already strained. With less food, the wars between cities grew more brutal, no longer over prestige, but over survival. The monuments tell the story. In the final years, the inscriptions speak more and more of conflict, and less of feasts and glorious triumphs. Itzel would have watched the violence draw closer. Cities attacking cities over stores of food and water. Refugees on the roads. Perhaps her own family divided between staying to defend what remained or fleeing to try their luck somewhere else. The order that had seemed eternal was unraveling before her eyes. And then the kings began to fall. One by one, the great cities stopped raising monuments. In many of them, the last date recorded on a stela marks the moment the machine simply stopped. In Copan, in Tikal, in Palenque, the inscriptions grow sparse until they fall completely silent. The clock that had counted the centuries stopped being cut into stone. There was no single final battle, no single day of the end. It was a collapse in slow motion, spread across roughly a century and a half. One city fell, its people scattered. They pressed on the neighboring cities, which fell in turn. Like a giant line of dominoes toppling through the forest from the southern lowlands northward. And here lies the most chilling part for Itzel. She didn't die in a cataclysm. She most likely grew old watching the city empty out. Watching the plazas where she once played fall silent. Watching the forest, the very forest the Maya had cut down, begin to swallow the temples back, root by root, stone by stone. The end wasn't a bang. It was an abandonment. When the Europeans arrived, centuries later, they found the great cities of the South already reclaimed by the jungle. Pyramids draped in trees, temples turning into green hills. And they created the legend, a mysterious civilization that had vanished without a trace. That romantic image took hold of the world's imagination. And it is wrong. First mistake, the Maya were never a single people in a single place. While the cities of the south fell to the drought, in the north of Yucatan others were flourishing. Chichen Itza lived its golden age after the classic collapse, becoming one of the largest and most powerful cities in all of Maya history. The Maya world did not die. It changed address. Second mistake, and the most important one, the Maya never left. The direct descendants of that people went on living in the same lands. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they found millions of Maya alive, organized into kingdoms, speaking their languages, growing their corn. The civilization had transformed, but the people were still there. And that is when the blow against their memory came. In 1562, a Spanish friar named Diego de Landa ordered the burning of thousands of Maya books, calling them the work of the devil. Entire libraries of knowledge, astronomy, history, religion, turned to ashes in a single afternoon. Of all the ancient Maya books, only 4 survived. 4. The Dresden, Madrid, and Paris codices, and 1 fragment. That is all that remains of the literature of a civilization that had been writing for more than 1,000 years. Think of what was lost. The Maya version of their own history, their own science, burned by a man who couldn't read it. That was the true Maya disappearance, the loss of the memory, not of the people. But the writing had the last word. For centuries, no one could read the glyphs carved into the stones. They were treated as mysterious decoration. Until, over the course of the 20th century, scholars around the world, piece by piece, cracked the code. Today we can read the names of the kings, the dates, the wars. Itzel's stones have begun to speak again. And what they say confirms the science. They speak of kings, of rituals, of rain, of war. They match the droughts recorded in the lakes and the caves. The story the stelae tell and the story the climate recorded are the same story, that of a brilliant civilization that ran into the limits of the very land it lived on. So, in the end, what brought down the Maya of the classic period? Science today doesn't give a single cause. It gives a perfect storm, prolonged drought, deforestation that made that drought worse, overpopulation squeezed onto a fragile land, wars growing ever fiercer over resources, and the collapse of faith in kings who promised what they could no longer deliver. Notice how none of this is mysterious. None of it is supernatural. It is, in fact, deeply human and deeply familiar. A society that grows too much, consumes too much, leans too heavily on a single resource, ignores the warnings of its environment, and discovers too late that the balance that seemed eternal had been fragile all along. That is why archaeologists and climate scientists study the Maya with such urgency today. They are not a fairy tale about aliens or prophecies. They are a real case of an advanced civilization that altered its own local climate, exhausted its own resources, and paid the price. Sound familiar? It should. Now, the detail that changes everything in Itzel's story. If you could follow her descendants down through the centuries, through the Spanish conquest, through the colonial era, through the wars, through the persecution, you would find them today, alive, standing, speaking. There are around 6 million people who speak Maya languages at this very moment. About 4 million are in Guatemala, where nearly half the population speaks some Maya language. Another 2.5 million are in Mexico, in Yucatan, and in Chiapas. And there are Maya communities in Belize, in Honduras, in El Salvador, and, today, spread across the United States. There are around 30 different Maya languages still alive. They are one of the most successful families of indigenous languages on the entire American continent. Maya children learn these languages at home today, the same way Itzel learned hers more than 1,000 years ago. The same roots, the same words for corn, for the sun, for the rain. The voice of Itzel's people has never fallen silent. They still grow corn with techniques inherited from their ancestors. In some communities, they still use versions of the sacred 260-day calendar, the very one that organized life in the great cities. They still tell the myths of the people of maize. The classic civilization fell, but the culture crossed 1,000 years and arrived whole in the present. And the cities? They didn't truly vanish. They were there the whole time, beneath the forest. Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, Copan. Today they are archaeological sites visited by millions of people. Temples that Itzel watched being built have come back into the light, dug out of the jungle that had swallowed them. Her past is now the heritage of all humanity, and the forest still holds secrets. In recent years, a technology called LiDAR, which maps the ground with lasers from an aircraft seeing straight through the tree canopy, revealed something breathtaking. Beneath the jungle of Guatemala, hidden for centuries, lay tens of thousands of Maya structures never seen before. Pyramids, houses, raised roads, walls, entire agricultural fields, an urban landscape far larger and denser than anyone had imagined. Cities linked by causeways through the forest. Itzel's world was even bigger and more connected than the archaeologists had dreamed, and much of it hasn't even been excavated yet. Every new discovery confirms the same lesson. The Maya were not primitive. They were not a people who failed. They were brilliant engineers, astronomers, mathematicians, and architects who sustained millions of people in a tropical forest for more than 1,000 years. Few civilizations in history have done so much with so little. What brought them down wasn't a lack of intelligence. It was an excess of success. They grew so much that they overshot what the land could give. And when the climate changed, partly through their own doing, the whole system, which depended on reliable rain and abundant harvests and trustworthy kings, lost its footing. It was their very greatness that opened the crack. Think again about Itzel. She never knew she was living through the end of an era. To her, it was just life growing harder year after year. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable truth of all, that the great collapses of history rarely come announced. They arrive disguised as bad years, until one day you look around and the city is empty. Let's put together the pieces of what science actually knows. The Maya of the classic period were not destroyed by a prophecy, nor by gods, nor by spaceships. They were pushed to the edge by a combination of drought, deforestation, overpopulation, and war, factors that fed one another until the whole thing broke. The drought weakened the harvests. The weak harvests weakened the kings. The weakened kings couldn't hold the order. The disorder turned to war. The war emptied the cities. And the empty cities were handed back to the forest the Maya themselves had cleared, each piece pushing the next, like a domino effect that lasted for generations. And the deforestation deserves a spotlight, because it's the most modern piece of the puzzle. The Maya cut down forest in order to grow. By cutting down the forest, they made their local climate worse, hotter, drier. Then came the great natural drought, and the two effects stacked on top of each other. Humanity altering its own climate and reaping the consequences. 1,000 years ago. That's why this story isn't only about the past. It's a mirror, a civilization that believed itself untouchable, that mistook growth for safety, that ignored the signs until they were impossible to ignore, and that discovered, too late, that even the most advanced society in its world depended, in the end, on one simple thing: rain at the right time. And this is the most beautiful part of the whole story. The Maya proved something else, too. They proved that a people can lose their cities, their books, their kings, and their temples, and still not die. Because culture isn't stone. It's language, it's memory, it's the way you plant the corn, it's the name you give your child. And that, the Maya never lost. Itzel watched her world collapse. But the language she spoke, someone still speaks today. The corn she planted, someone still plants. The calendar she followed, someone still consults. The stones she watched being raised, today we can read again. In a way, Itzel outlasted the collapse. She just didn't live to know it. So the next time you hear that the Maya mysteriously disappeared, you'll know the truth. They didn't disappear. It wasn't a mystery. It was drought, it was excess, it was war, it was human choice. And the people? The people are alive, with 6 million voices telling us the story isn't over. The great cities fell. Tikal fell silent. Kalakmul was swallowed by the jungle. The kings became names on stones that no one could read for centuries. But running through all of it, from the classic forest to the streets of today, there is one thread that never broke. The Maya people, who survived their own collapse and are still here. And maybe that's the greatest lesson Itzel would leave us. That civilizations are fragile, but peoples are stubborn. That stone crumbles, but memory endures. And that the true end of a people doesn't come when their cities fall. It comes only when no one is left to remember who they were. And the Maya refused to let that happen. If this story gripped you, do one thing for me. Drop a comment down below telling me what surprised you most. That the Maya invented zero, that the drought lasted 13 years, that only 4 books survived, or that 6 million people still speak Maya languages today. And if you love history told the way it deserves, vast, real, and impossible to forget, subscribe to World and Stories. Because the world is full of stories like this one, waiting to be told properly, with no myth and no invention. Itzel's civilization touched the sky, counted the stars, and invented zero. And even so, it was brought down by its own thirst. But her people are still here, speaking, planting, and remembering. And maybe that's why this story still has so much to teach us. Until the next story.